I get asked this question all the time. What are my favorite albums? Well, I'm going to answer that question today on this video of Todd's Turntable Talk. Welcome to another episode of Todd's Turntable Talk. Before we get started, like always, please make sure to hit that subscribe button as well as the bell notification to let you know whenever new episodes drop on our channel. Many people have asked me what some of my favorite albums of all time are. I'm very blessed to have most of them in my collection, and I'm going to show them to you, talk a little bit about why they're my favorites, and maybe turn you on to something you've never checked out before, or maybe something you want to give another listen to. First up, this album is probably will always be in my top 10 albums of all time, and it hits in a way that I can't ever shake, and I always go back to this record. He's had many other albums and many other great albums, but this is the one I always come back to, and this is Ryan Adams' Easy Tiger. The songs on this album are so beautiful. Songs like Two and Everybody Knows and These Girls is amazing. Pearls on a String, Rip Off, Halloween Head. This album is amazing, and this was shown to me by my buddy Ashley Peacock years ago, and I want to say 2012 when I first got back into collecting records, and this is one of the first ones I really hunted for and found in Ohio, and it has been in my collection ever since and is spun on my turntable still quite often. Next up, this is probably one of my favorite all-out rock and roll albums. This is Aerosmith's 9 Lives. This album, so many people love 70s Aerosmith more than anything else, and God bless if that's your jam, that's awesome. I absolutely love 80s and 90s Aerosmith, and I think this album is one of their masterpieces, if not maybe their masterpiece, in my opinion. Songs like Taste of India, Full Circle, Pink is a fun song, Fallen Angels, Attitude Adjustment, Crash is awesome, Ain't That a Bitch is so good. It's just a really, really fun album, and just some great driving riffs that never let up, and it's great. I love it. This next album has been in my top 10 favorite albums since I was in, I want to say, middle school when this came out. Man, am I aging myself. But this is an album that is something that I just absolutely love, and it's one of those albums that if you want to just chill, put on a record and just chill and relax and get lost in the music, it's a great album for that too. And this is Counting Crows, August and Everything After. This album, especially songs like Perfect Blue Buildings, Anna Begins, Sullivan Street, The Rain King, Round Here, every song is great. There's not a bad song on it. Pretty much like all these albums I'm going to show you, I don't believe there's a bad song on them. And this album is just amazing. I just love it. This next one is an album by one of my favorite rock bands. They just released a new album, which we did a review on. If you want to check that out on the channel, there's a review video for that, an unboxing and review. But this album is the one of theirs that is probably my absolute favorite. And this is Wasting Light by Foo Fighters. Songs like Dear Rosemary, Walk is probably my favorite song of theirs of all time. Alandria, These Days, Rope, Bridge Burning, this is another album where there's no let up. And this is the 45 RPM version, so it's 2 discs, and it spins at 45 RPMs. And I hear they do that so they can put more bass and stuff in the songs. I don't know if I honestly care that much, because when you have a good setup, you can just turn the bass up. I mean, whatever. But still, it is a great album. And if you are a fan of great rock and roll and great songwriting, this is a great album. This next album, I believe, sonically, emotionally, is one of the most beautiful albums ever made. And it was produced by Daniel Lanois, who is famous for producing U2, as well as other acts like Willie Nelson and some other groups. But this album is one that I've loved for a long time, and they did an anniversary tour of it a few years ago, and we got to see it live, and it was just incredible. And this is Wrecking Ball by Emmylou Harris. This album is so, like, spacious and just chill, but also the lyrics are incredible. The vibe is amazing. Her voice, I mean, the voice of an angel, let's be honest. And this album is just, it's so good. Next, my favorite singer-songwriter in the whole world. I bought this album in 1989 at a Kmart in Burton, Michigan, with my own allowance money. It was the first record I ever bought, and I still have it today, and that is Billy Joel's An Innocent Man. This album is what got me started collecting records. It's what got me started wanting to be a musician. This album is a huge piece of my life and something that I will always say is one of my all-time favorites in the whole world. Plus, it just plays like a greatest hits album with songs like Innocent Man, The Longest Time, Tell Her About It, Uptown Girl, Keeping the Faith. There's so many great songs on here, but the deep cuts on this are also great. Songs like This Night, which he credits as written by Billy Joel and Beethoven, because he kind of copped a Beethoven song in the chorus, which is pretty funny. But overall, this album is just incredible. I've also been a long-standing member of the Kiss Army. I love Kiss. I have done a couple review videos of their stuff here on the channel, which again, you can look through the channel and find. And so many people will say original makeup era is the best, or this version's the best. I don't really have an attachment to any one version of Kiss. For me, it's all about the songs. It's all about the feel that it invokes with me. That being said, my all-time favorite Kiss album, because one, this is the album that got me into Kiss. This album, when I heard it as a kid, made me want to go back and dive deeper into their discography and into their history and become a very big fan. But this is the album that started it all, and I still think this is one of the best hard rock albums ever made. And this is Kiss's album, Revenge. Songs like Unholy, Domino, Tough Love, Heart of Chrome, Paralyzed. It's a great album. And the guitar work from Paul Stanley and Bruce Kulick is amazing. This is probably Eric Singer's best performance as the drummer of Kiss. Bob Ezrin, who is an incredible producer, did amazing on this record. This album just kills. It just kills. It's so good. Next is the album that when I got back into vinyl collecting, I found that my parents still had my old vinyl records, which was awesome, which I've already shown you at least one of those. And there's another one in a minute. But there was an album I really had been into lately, and it was more in a meditative form, if that makes sense. It's an album that I would find if I was having struggles, like internally, or really needing to kind of center myself and get back, to just to kind of explore my feelings, but while listening to music. I don't know quite how to explain it. I hope you understand what I'm saying. This album really did that for me. And I talked about this person a couple minutes ago, talking about the Emmylou Harris record, but this album is Akadi by Daniel Lanois. This is, there's writing on it because this is a promotional copy. This was for a radio station, as you can see with the little gold lettering here. What that means is before the album comes out, it is sent to, at that time, sent to radio stations and stuff to start spinning the songs and start plugging the album. So it was really crazy because I manifested this in a way into my collection, because as we're driving around Cincinnati, Ohio, me and my dear friend Ashley Peacock, we're talking about, amazing records we wished existed or hope to find one day. And this was the first album I mentioned. I'm like, man, if I could ever find this on vinyl, holy crap. And, we didn't even know if it existed on vinyl because this was 1989. And in the late 80s, early 90s, vinyl was on its way out. So not a lot of people were pressing them as much as they were when they were the thing. So we just kind of like giggled and like, yeah, that'd be cool. But I mean, the likelihood of finding that, probably not. We ended up at this place called Everybody's in Ohio, in the Cincinnati-ish area. An amazing store. They're still there. If you live around the area, go check them out. Their store is phenomenal. We walked in and I started thumbing through the records, and in the L's, I was actually looking for a Led Zeppelin record because there was a few of them I didn't have in my collection yet, and this album was sitting there. The only copy. I have never, ever, ever, ever seen it in a record store since. And it's in pristine condition, sounds amazing. And this album is probably in my top 5 albums of all time for many reasons that I explained. But this album is just amazing. Now, staying on Daniel Lanois kick for a half a second, and it's funny because he's attached to 3 of my favorite albums in different ways. So this is back to the production side of things, not one of his albums. But this album I was first told about by my friend Tim Freeman, who's an amazing drummer in the Flint, Genesee County, Michigan area. And he educated me on this band through a song of theirs called Voodoo, which I had never heard until I got to know Tim. And then I discovered the rest of the album, and me and Ash all became huge fans of it. And one day he came over and he had found 2 copies of it. Got one for himself and one for me. And this is Yellow Moon by the Neville Brothers. If you want amazing, and I mean amazing, New Orleans funk and soul, this is the album right here. This album is so good. Songs like Yellow Moon, My Blood, Fire and Brimstone. There's also very, very beautiful renditions of Will the Circle Be Unbroken? As well as A Change Is Gonna Come by Sam Cooke. This is a beautiful album and very much worth checking out. This next album is one I originally borrowed from my uncle years ago, and I was just getting into rock as a kid, and my Uncle Paul said, if you want some great rock, you're going to want to listen to this. And he handed me this record. I took it home, fell in love with it and the band, but it also is, in my opinion, the greatest concept album ever made, and just an amazing album. And then years later, I went and bought one for myself, and have had it ever since. This is Pink Floyd's The Wall. This is a first pressing. I was holding up the back of it, but as you can see, there's no difference. This is the first pressing I managed to find, and it's amazing. The way the story weaves through the album, and if you really sit back and really let yourself get immersed in it, you're along for the ride the whole way. The story makes sense. There's not a lot of like explaining that he has to do to the audience. And just the versatility and the songwriting and how raw the emotions and just this album is amazing. Produced also by Bob Ezrin. This is, in my opinion, Pink Floyd's shining album right here. This, and then with honorable mentions to Dark Side and Wish You Were Here and Animals. Those are great too, but this one is my all-time favorite. Next up, we have, I believe, one of the greatest in the world to ever do what he did. A very versatile musician, and somebody that it's amazing because he would reinvent himself in ways through his career, but every album he did still sounded like him, and he had a very distinct style regardless of the way he chose to present that. This album, I think, is my favorite Prince album of all time, and this is Sign of the Times, with such great, amazing songs as Sign of the Times, The Cross, Play in the Sunshine, Housequake, I Can Never Take the Place of Your Man, and also, I think, the best slow jam Prince ever did, Slow Love. This album is amazing. We're nearing the end. I know there's a lot of them, but I can't narrow it down to just like 4 or 5. I just can't. And honestly, this list will probably change in a year, so who knows. But this next album was a soundtrack of a summer for me. Many camping trips over a couple summers, me and my childhood best friend Dustin would listen to this album on repeat. We just absolutely loved it, and I still, to this day, think it's the best album this band ever made. It's controversial when I show you because most people will love everything way before them, or way before this album, but I think this is the best one, and this is R.E.M's Automatic for the People. Songs like Drive, Try Not to Breathe, Everybody Hurts, Man on the Moon, Night Swimming. Oh my God, Night Swimming. This album is amazing. Find the River, I think, is one of my favorite closing tracks on a record. It leaves you with this amazing sense of peace, and the song just washes over you, and it's so good. But this is my all-time favorite R.E.M. album. This next album is, in my opinion, as I said about R.E.M., this is this artist's masterpiece. And he's known for his big hits like Born to Run and Born in the USA, Dancing in the Dark, Glory Days, things like that. But for my money, the best album Bruce Springsteen ever released was this album, Nebraska. This is Bruce Springsteen, and I believe a 4-track recorder recorded in the bedroom of a house he rented. Just him, guitar, and a harmonica. And the songs are so beautiful. The writing is incredible. The vibe is unmistakable. It's just a great album. It's very chill. Definitely not your typical Springsteen, but the writing on this album I think is unmatched by anything else he's ever done since. Definitely a great album. 3 more to go. This next one is, in my opinion, the ultimate supergroup. By that I mean, for those who don't know, a supergroup is when members of other famous bands get together and form another band of their own. Now, they could be famous solo musicians or people from another band, and they get together and form another band and make something amazing. I don't think there's been a better supergroup since this. There's been some other great ones, but none have topped this. And this is the Traveling Wilburys, Volume 1. For my money, when you have these amazing writers, and I mean amazing, you have George Harrison, Roy Orbison, Tom Petty, Jeff Lynne, and Bob Dylan all together for one album, And every song on it is just incredible. The production's amazing. They all take turns having songs they sing. I think Dylan has the most that he sings on here. If I'm not mistaken, I think he has 2 or 3. I think, I'm pretty sure. But it is an incredible album. Produced, I think Jeff Lynne produced this. Yeah, by Jeff Lynne and George Harrison. They produced this together. They went on to make a volume 3. There is no volume 2, for any of you wondering. They went on to make a volume 3, but Roy Orbison had passed away. And it was still cool, but it kind of was missing a little bit of something. And so it was still good, but wasn't quite the same. But this album is just incredible and will always be in my favorite albums of all time. My favorite band in the whole world. My favorite band in the whole world has always been U2. It's been U2 since I was about 15. It's never going to change. And just leave it at that, essentially. But my favorite U2 album of all time is Achtung Baby. There's not a bad song on here with things like Even Better Than the Real Thing, Zoo Station, So Cruel, One, Mysterious Ways, Ultraviolet, Love is Blindness. This album is so good. And it's one of those albums, like there's some albums you might skip a song or two when listening to it. This is one where you can't skip one. Well, I can't. This album, also produced by Daniel Lanois. Man, there's a trend here that I didn't even intend. This album is a masterpiece. And I know it's popular to say the Joshua Tree is their classic album. And it very well, it is. But for my money, this is my favorite album of theirs of all time. And last but definitely not least, this album I got when I was a teenager and still kind of collecting records. There was a place called Jelly Beans, which was a used books and records store. And I wanted to get a Stevie Wonder album. I didn't have any. I had the 45. I just called to say I love you because a kid. But I wanted some good Stevie. And the only album they had was this one. And when I took it home and put it on, I was blown away by how amazing this record is. And I've listened to pretty much his entire discography since. And this is the one I always come back to. I think this is his masterpiece. The album that, if you're going to get somebody into Stevie Wonder, if you're like, man, you really need to listen to Stevie's albums, not just the singles, this is the one you give them. And this is Songs in the Key of Life. This is an original pressing, has the bonus 45 of something extra in here. This album is so good. And the way the whole thing starts with a message that is still so relevant today, even more so today than it was when it was written, in my opinion, a song called Love is in Need of Love Today. And you have songs like that, songs like Village Ghetto Land, Sir Duke, I Wish, Knocks Me Off My Feet, Pastime Paradise, which later got renamed and redone into Gangster's Paradise by Coolio. She's So Lovely, Joy Inside My Tears, As, Another Star. This album is just so good. Classic Detroit Motown, but recorded in LA. But this album, in my opinion, is the quintessential Stevie Wonder's album that everybody should have in their record collection and everybody should check out, and is definitely in my top 10 favorite albums in the whole world, always. So there you have it. Question answered. My favorite albums of all time, right there in one video for you. Hope you enjoyed this. Hope maybe you might be inspired to check out some of these albums. Most of them are still in print. A lot of them have since been reissued. Some haven't. The Neville Brothers album, you're going to have to YouTube it or maybe stumble across it at a record store. The Daniel Lanois album, he reissued it on gold vinyl a few years back, but even that's really hard to get nowadays. The rest of them are pretty available. So if you are interested in any of those, you can jump on Discogs and find them. Many record shops carry them. I definitely encourage you guys all to check out at least one of the albums I've mentioned on here that you might not have heard before. So until next time, we'll see you for another episode of Todd's Turntable Talk.